I love selling in Asia, but it's frustrating. I have a certain style to understand the local culture. The pace of the deal is different. Probably not worth going to Beijing for this one meeting. Selling in China, we had to have local people come out of this deal with face, but it's difficult.
大家好，今天 Jojo 姐带你走进我的客户家访之中。那今天访谈的对象是前彭博社的全球销售总监。So nice to visit your house here.
I mean, I'm happy to. So my name is Howard Rees. I have been selling globally for various fintech firms for around 25 years. Bulk of my career was at Bloomberg, where I finished up as the global head of sales for their enterprise data management solutions. I've subsequently worked for private capital data analytics firms and most recently for a PE-backed data and analytics firm called Macrobond AB, which was a Swedish headquartered company.
Yeah, and then you were the COO.
I was the CCO, Chief Commercial Officer.
At the Bloomberg, you are the...
Bloomberg, I was global head of sales for the enterprise data management.
We have a new name for global heads. So we have the Chief Revenue Officer.
Yeah, I mean, Bloomberg doesn't have those titles.
I know, but so as a C-suite, we generate different CEOs, Chief Executive Officer, and then head of sales. We call it Chief Revenue Officer,
Yeah.
And CCO is like a Chief Commercial.
Yeah, so it encompass new business, existing business, customer success. So it was the full marketing, so the full commercial range of activities for the company, not just sales.
So talk about us. I'm honored to be your coach.
Yeah.
Personal, like an executive coach for the last 2 years, and I see that you are battles with managing the global sales, not just the Asian, Americans and EMEA as well.
Mm-hmm.
And then I can see the success, you make a good deal, for helping Macrobond. Right?
Yeah,
Sell with Francisco Capital. Can you tell us about this?
Yeah, so Nordic Capital were the owners of Macrobond, and they managed to sell Macrobond to Francisco Partners, which is a huge West Coast-based software growth company. It was actually voted the EMEA PE exit of the year in the private equity award.
I was with you and your teams. I know all of the tension, preparations.
So really successful exit.
Yeah.
For what is a really fantastic company, actually.
Yeah, I saw the tensions. I mean, you prepare a lot of for the presentations for the PE, and then so the deal in the end is published in the news. Basically, so you sold 700 million euros.
100 million euros. It was a great price, but Macrobond is a fantastic business. It really is. Yeah. Leader in its space, huge growth opportunity still ahead of it. So it was amazing to be part of that journey.
Yeah. So let's move to talk about how you're leading your teams.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, how you how many people in Macrobond?
So Macrobond, there were 4 teams. So Macrobond, when I joined, was a very much a Scandinavian company, headquartered in Sweden. Dominant in that home market, and then starting to grow in EMEA, but really not much business in APAC or in the US. And I think what we did, which was really important, was bring a much more sort of UK/US type sales motion to what is, I would say, for Scandinavians, is very consensus driven, and maybe not quite as dynamic as I was used to, and the results really followed quite quickly. I think what we also learned, though, was that even though we built a very, very strong go-to-market motion that really turbocharged our business in EMEA and the US, we really started to see when we went into APAC that we couldn't really have a one-size-fits-all model because the buyers were just different.
Yes.
And that's where we started to talk, and where your advice was so useful. I mean, I had dealt with global businesses before. I had sold in APAC before, but this was the first time where I really wanted to really grow a business
aggressively
aggressively
Asian,
in
APAC.
Asia.
Yeah. And you conquered, like you met lots of difficulties and
Yeah,
challenges.
I mean, I think the first thing that we did, which was something that you advised, was strong local leadership. Um, and that meant not just the overall leadership in the APAC region, which was based out of Hong Kong, but if we were going to be successful in China and Japan, we had to have local people on the ground. Um, and the reasons behind that were various and many. I think that key to it is really one, that for them to be able to understand the local culture,
Yes.
but also the fact that by having those people on the ground, it showed a certain level of commitment to the region that you don't get if you try and have Western people parachuting in and then going home again afterwards. So, I mean, I do remember when I was working at my previous company, we had a huge deal with CIC in China.
CIC, okay.
We got to the last two and we were invited to present in Beijing. And my boss said, you know what, it's probably not worth going to Beijing for this one meeting, is it? We should just tell them we're going to do it on Zoom. And I said to him, we can do it on Zoom, but I guarantee you we will not win this business, because if the other team sends someone and we don't send someone, they will consider that an insult. And we will not win the deal. It doesn't matter what the price is. It doesn't matter how good the products are. They will consider that to be a loss of face. And so I flew all the way to Beijing for one meeting, and they had probably 30 people in the room. Because everyone who was involved in the deal, everyone who touched the deal would be impacted by the deal, wanted to be in that room. And if I hadn't gone,
you wouldn't get the deal.
Wouldn't have happened. So we did win that deal, which was quite lucky, as we'd spent a lot of money to send me there.
It's lucky. It's lucky that you can, like, your company is spending a lot of money sent you there. It's also lucky your company have you.
It's lucky they listened.
Understand.
It's lucky they listened, basically. I mean,
because you understand Chinese culture.
I mean, I think basically because of the way I was brought up, I was actually brought up in the south of England until I was 10 years old. And then my mum remarried and I was immediately transplanted to this grimy northern ex-mining town. And the cultural differences, even in that 300-mile journey, were absolutely huge. People just thought differently, acted differently, weren't massively welcoming to a
So from the south of England to north.
South of England to north is almost as big a cultural gap as the UK to China.
And then when you think, but you think about China like such a Chinese, like our population.
I mean, I think that really, I guess the point I'm trying to make is that made me appreciate really from
the differences,
that there are differences in the way that people think and act, and understanding them. I had to change the way I behaved quite quickly just to survive in this mining town, because it was a very, very, I would say, almost hostile environment compared to where I've been.
How old were you?
I was 10.
You were only 10.
Yeah. And then really moving into the business world, I started out selling just in the UK. Then I started selling in Europe. I was selling in the Netherlands. And the Dutch are very different to people in the UK. They have a reputation for plain speaking, but they also don't like to say no. So a lot of times you would think that you were making a ton of progress and they would give you very robust feedback about a deal, but they wouldn't actually say no.
But the feedback is no.
But they wouldn't say yes either. So the deals would just carry on going and going.
Dutch people.
Yeah. So you had to learn to get to know that getting to a no was almost as important as getting to a yes. And then after that, I relocated to the US, and the US is a salesman's dream for selling in.
Really? How? Why? Can you explain to us?
So, I mean, the first thing is that they love English people. They love the English accent.
They even say that I have an English accent.
Yeah. So one of my colleagues told me that he said, even when you're saying something really dumb, you sound smart.
And they like they like the business suit as well, right?
I used to ham it up a bit. I had pinstripe business suits, crumbly overcoat, spats and a cane. But the thing about the Americans is they're very transactional. They don't mind paying for something if they think it's going to improve their business.
Yeah.
So even if they have something else and you show them that the one you are selling them is better, they will pay for it.
They pay for it, yeah.
And that means that deals are a lot more fluid. They're a lot more predictable as well because they execute much more quickly. Decision making can be a lot more concentrated. So you don't have to convince as many people. And so the sales cycles are short.
It's
Yeah.
yeah.
And so if I had to pick one place to sell a deal to save my life, it would be in the US.
The US, yeah. Can I bring you back to your childhood? You were 10 years old and then have to move a city from South England to North, which is quite different. The amount of people you see is different as well. So then you start to, that was the time that you start to realize I have to adapt myself, like my behavior, to be able to suit the new environment.
Absolutely. I mean, even to the extent that I started trying to adopt a different accent to try and fit in.
Oh, really? You can speak different accents?
Yeah.
So what does South accent sound
So
like?
the accent I have now is a Southern accent, but before I was talking like this and having to speak like in a Northern accent in order to fit in with the people up north. So very, very different. And the thing is that this small northern town, it's the word parochial has a negative context, but they loved that town and they very rarely left the town, and they were really, really happy and deeply suspicious of people from outside the town. So me with my Southern accent was really, I stood out like a sore.
You have to blend in.
So I needed to blend in. When you're a child, especially, you don't want to be different. And so, yeah, I spent quite a lot of time like a chameleon trying to change from a Southerner to a Northerner as quickly as I could. And then, interestingly enough, as soon as I left the North, I very quickly wanted to
switch it back to who you are, right? Yeah. Authenticity. So then, like that link to a questions about, so when Chinese immigrations here, of course, we look completely different. You can't, yes, people can't tell whether you're from South or North of England, but people can tell we're Asian, we're Chinese. And then, so there's quite a lots of, quite a big group of people that are trying to speak the Queen accent and then just adapt to the local culture, like go to the pub.
Yeah.
And then, I don't know, it's adaptation, right? So do you think that's an advantage or disadvantage, like when we talk about authenticity? Stick to who you are.
I think from my experience, if I take Japan, for example, then the Japanese will love it if you make an attempt to mirror some of their cultural norms, but they understand that you're never going to be able to be as polite as another Japanese person. So they will give you a free pass on things that would be considered incredibly rude if another Japanese person did them. But they do love it if you will try. So if you can learn a few words of Japanese, if you can bow when you meet them, if you can remember to, even small things like how you take their business card, you don't just stick it in your pocket. You take a good look at it and make sure that they can see that you've taken the time to understand who they are and what their role is. So I think authenticity is obviously important because people don't like fakes. But I think that you can, but I think that, look, over the years, I've been in sales for 25 years. I have a certain style. My style is quite direct. I'm very transparent. I'm very happy to tell people if things won't work and explain why they won't work, but why there is a different way to do things. And I find that builds a level of trust. And so I wouldn't want to change who I am as a salesperson, but at the same time, I don't want to be, and this is going to be a horrible pun, a bull in a china shop. I understand, having spent some time selling internationally, having spent some time working with you, that, for example, selling in China, the meeting that I'm having face to face, is a tiny part of the actual process. It's like the tip of the iceberg. And actually,
Yeah.
what happens behind the scenes with all of the people in the meeting is much more important to whether the deal is going to be a success. And so one of the things that you taught me was you have to think about what is in it for everyone in that room. How is everyone in that room going to come out of this deal with face? Because you can't have losers, because that will just torpedo the deal. And so whether that is discounts, whether that is, taking them for dinner, whether that is giving them a gift, but there are so many small things that you can do to keep that deal moving that go way beyond, like a Western deal can be a presentation. It can be some follow-up questions. You send a proposal, you start talking about the price. But there are so many nuances and elements to a deal when you're dealing with. And I remember, to give you an example, I was trying to sell to the Bank of Singapore when I was working at Bloomberg. And we got into this price war with our main competitor. And obviously the Bank of Singapore was loving it. They were playing us off against each other, and we were kept coming down in price, and they would come down in price. We would come down in price, then they'd throw in some free professionals. I had an idea. I said, you know what? I'm going to ask the chairman of Bloomberg to meet the chairman of the Bank of Singapore. And that will show them how seriously we take this, because what more face could I give them than getting the chairman,
with the CEO of
the chairman of Bloomberg,
the chairman,
to meet with them. So I suggested it. And
what's the story afterwards?
So the Bank of Singapore said, you know what, we'll take the idea to our chairman. They came back to me. They said our chairman would be thrilled to meet the chairman of Bloomberg. One question though.
Oh, really? One more?
Have you offered any discounts so far? I said, are you kidding? I said, have we offered discounts? We've offered so many discounts. We're practically giving it away.
Sure,
And they said, okay, well, there's a problem here, because you're going to have to offer another discount, because my chairman cannot meet your chairman. If his subordinates have managed to get a discount and he doesn't get one, he will lose face. And so despite the fact that we were cutting it to the bone already, we had to give them yet another discount
just for the face.
Just for the face of the chairman.
Hierarchy parts,
Yeah. So that was, for me, that was a really interesting learning experience, and really made me see how important that concept of face is in those deals with Japan, and especially with China, and how you always have to be cognizant of how the offers you're making, the people you're making to them, even the timing of them, can make such a big difference.
So the culture nuances is really important for those big deals.
100%.
Yeah. So what is the culture challenges when you bring your new, to manage a Chinese team or manage a team like in Asia?
I mean, I think if you're going to build a team in China, like we said earlier, you have to have, it's not enough to have people who speak Chinese. I mean, I'll give you another example. We had a Korean deal, and we actually, this is back in a previous company, and we realized that we had a Korean speaker working in our New York office. And he spoke fluent Korean, but he'd never been to Korea. But his parents were Korean.
Yes.
So we thought this was going to be our secret weapon, fluent Korean speaker. We sent him along, and it almost destroyed the whole deal, because he had absolutely no idea how to behave. And so he looked Korean. He sounded Korean. They just thought he was the rudest Korean person they'd ever met.
He's American.
He was an American.
He grew up there.
Yeah, so he was a Korean wolf, in sheep's clothing. And yeah, so again, I think it's important. It's great if you have Western people who can speak Chinese or Japanese, and that's definitely an advantage for
Adding
them.
some value, but you have to have a local team.
I think you have to have a local team. Local team, ideally local leadership, people who understand the pace of the deal is different. there are rhythms to a deal almost that you have to listen to.
You have to have the autonomy, for the team as well, right?
Yeah. So the secret to success in sales is you try and make at least 80% of what you do repeatable across the organization, because otherwise you can't scale. But when you come to regions like Korea, like China, like Japan, you have to accept that the cadence is going to be different, that sometimes it's going to be, the deals are more opaque, if you like, because you're not always sure, even that the decision makers are in the room with you, because oftentimes the person who makes the decision is way outside of the people that you're meeting, and you have zero chance of meeting them because they are way too senior.
The hierarchy on
The
top.
hierarchy is so important. So your job is to try and feed as much information up
As
to
they
the
request.
person as they request. Do it quickly, do it respectfully. But when you're selling in the UK or the US, you'll always say, who's the champion, who's the decision maker? I need to know who these people are. I need to be in touch with them, because that's how I know that these deals will get done.
Yeah, but in China, in Asia,
you don't have that.
it's the opposite.
You don't have that visibility.
No.
So the Chinese market is too huge to ignore. It's for financial services where I work, it's the second biggest economy, the second biggest. Most of the biggest banks in the world outside the US are in China. You can't ignore it, but it's difficult. And you have onshore and offshore, and the onshore is almost impenetrable for a company like ours. But then you have the offshore guys who have that global perspective. That's the pond I fish in. And yeah, I would say that I always had that awareness of cultural differences, but I do think that the work we did together was really helpful in certainly in unlocking a couple of deals that we worked on.
Oh, thank you for your recognition for my work.
But more generally, just I'm one of those people who things never happen fast enough for me.
I know.
How
many times I told you that? Hold on.
Now is not fast enough for me. And so understanding that going slower to go faster was going to give me
the cadence is completely different.
Much greater chance of success, because a Chinese deal can't be rushed. It has to be done at their pace. And that's difficult for me, but I think that's why having that local sales team was important, and me having the patience to understand that they weren't being obstructive when they didn't have some of the information that I needed. That information just wasn't available to them. So, I love selling in Asia, but it's frustrating as well as rewarding. When it works, it's fantastic, but
frustrating. Take a long time.
It can take a long time,
and rewarding. If the deal gets through, right?
If the deal
Same
gets
as when you manage a Chinese team, can you tell us about your experience, for managing the Chinese team?
I mean, look, I think managing them is great in one way, because of the way they respect the hierarchy. They always called me boss, which I liked. And the other thing is, because of the importance of hierarchy, they would always bring me to really interesting meetings. And because they were bringing the boss, especially in Japan and in China, there would be a huge amount of people would come to the meeting to show respect, because I was coming. And having some of those people in the room who wouldn't normally join did unlock some deals for us. So I think that's one aspect of selling in Asia, which is really rewarding, and I would guess flattering, is that you get treated with a ton of respect, because they respect
you first.
Yeah, and they expect that respect in return. So yeah, so that is a big part of it. I think that that level of respect, you also have to be careful not to show too much respect. So I'll give you another example.
Yeah. So you mean not too much respect for Chinese, or your subordinate?
No, for the Chinese customer. So I'll give you another example. We were at Bloomberg. We had a local Chinese custody bank, and my salesperson came to me very excited. first Chinese deal we've ever done, and they're ready to sign. I said, that's fantastic. She said, there's just one thing. Clement, which is the guy who was signing it, has one small request, and he would just like this one part of the contract changed. I said, okay, that sounds fine. So I spoke to my boss, let him know the good news, said we were going to change this term. He said, that's absolutely fine, let's do it. So we sent the revised contract to Clement. 2 days later, my salesperson came back. Oh, listen, Clement's thrilled with the change in the contract. He just noticed one more thing, though. He would like the payment terms move from 90 days to 120 days.
Yeah, okay, so the second change.
Second change.
Okay.
So I said to the rep, so this is the last change, right?
All right.
Yeah, 100%.
Absolutely.
Clement's ready to
Last change, yeah.
ready to sign. So I went back to the CFO, said, can we change the payment terms? We changed the payment terms. We went back. 3 days later, sales reps back. Clement's spotted something else, and I can't even remember what it was, but I was just said, "Oh, for God's sake!" And I was actually working from home, and my wife said, "What's going on?" And I said, "Oh, I've got this deal in my Asia team, and this guy just keeps coming back again and again." And she said, "Is he Chinese?" I said, "Yeah. How do you know?" She said, "Because he will just keep coming back again and again and again until you say no." So I said, okay, I'll try it. So I said to the rep, tell Clement we've done enough.
Yeah.
And the next day, Clement signed. And I mean, I don't know how many times he would have come back. But my wife is actually Cantonese, so she had that cultural insight. And she'd lived in Hong Kong for 12 years, so she'd seen this happen again and again. So again, being able to work with someone who is from that culture and actually help me to understand it is huge. So look, I do think that if you're a Western sales leader and you have the opportunity to get some help with understanding the cultural nuances, there are.
So you break it at the right time.
Well, I think there's a real danger that people get confused between stereotypes and actual cultural differences. And stereotypes, are easy to fall into. Germans are efficient. French people are awkward, and some of those
British people
are handsome, successful.
British people.
Yeah. But there are stereotypes tend to exist for a reason, but you have to dig below the stereotypes and understand why did that stereotype come to exist. I mean, German people are detail orientated. They do like process. That doesn't mean they're rigid, but it does mean that if you're selling in Germany, you have to make sure that you have all the detail, that you have everything is mapped out. If you're selling in France, they're much more interested sometimes in which school your salesperson went to. If you're selling in Italy, they want to speak Italian. They will not take a business meeting in English unless they absolutely have to, and then your chance.
Really? I don't know that.
Italians love doing their business.
Oh, okay, so you have to bring your Italian translator.
You need to have an Italian speaker.
Speaker in the meeting.
Yeah, a salesperson who speaks Italian.
Okay.
So those are, even in Europe, you have those cultural differences. And I just think that if you are going to sell in Asia, you just need to get some help, because those cultural differences are amplified.
It's a huge difference from West side. Yeah. Thank you for your feedbacks and then your interesting stories.
A pleasure.